Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
Well, it's a great day. We're about 16 days out from TLU Vegas, and I'm here with Alicia Campbell, and she is the co-author of JuryBall and is a trial lawyer and a big data scientist. Did I get all that right? And a mom and a wife on top of it all.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. That's right.
That's great, Alicia. JuryBall. But before we get to JuryBall, which I know that you folks, as the data stuff, been working on and helping lawyers, tell us, how did you get into this? How did you find your calling into the law?
I found my calling to the law while I was a teacher. I was teaching in the inner city of San Antonio and, going through metal detectors to get to my classroom and having kids that couldn't have backpacks and a whole different kind of way of existing in a school that I was unfamiliar with. I hadn't attended a school like that. And in getting to know my students, I saw various struggles that they went through that didn't make sense to me, didn't seem right to me. And for whatever reason, it just made me feel like maybe I could make a change in the law, because in teaching, it's very difficult to. You can with students, but you can't change the system very easily. So I just decided maybe it would be great to go to law school. And John was teaching at an inner city school in San Antonio as well. It was a different one. And we just both kind of came to that thought, I don't know why, separately, and then said, hey, what do you want to do after we get hitched this summer? And so he was like, well, I think I want to go to law school. And I said, well, that's funny. I do too. And so basically we found a night program in St. Louis University and got married and moved and learned how to go to law school after that, while we were teaching high school during the day and going to law school at night 4 nights a week. So that's how we got our start. And that's how we ended up in the loop, really.
You ended up in the what?
In the loop. That's what we call it, in the loo, in St. Louis.
I got it now. I went to night school too, so it took 4 years, but kind of worked during the day. So it's a little bit different track than the folks that just go right from college to law school. How do you think going to night school helped you in your career?
We loved it because you're with professionals primarily, so there were more people who had day jobs. So we had police officers in our class, and we had IP guys and guys from Boeing, all who had a day job. And so it meant that our classes were really robust and very, very conversational, with a lot of people participating, because the last semester we were in school, we transferred to the day program just to get more of like clerkship opportunities and things like that. And it was amazing because nobody talked. And we really appreciated having so much, participation in the night classes, since everybody, seemed more into it, professional, paying for it. It cost them something because they were working during the day or had families. And so we really had a great time at St. Louis University. Made a lot of good friends that we still talk to today.
That's great. And so when you get out of school, when you get done with law school, tell us about your career track and how you got to the big data world.
So initially I got out and went to legal aid and worked in legal aid doing Social Security disability and mortgage fraud cases. And then I opened up my own firm, Campbell Law, in 2009. And I really loved the disability work. Every 2 weeks I went to a homeless shelter, helped get rid of tickets for people, and really worked to develop that part of my disability practice, helping people who are already kind of strapped. And then I litigated mortgage fraud cases. And John decided in 2012 that he was interested in becoming a law professor. And so I set up my firm so that I could live in Denver and still work my cases in St. Louis. And so I commuted like that for a while. And in 2014, John had this idea. He had been hanging around with people, academics, who were making up trials and then studying them online with juries. And he was like, wait a minute, what's happening? There's lawyers all over the country that have real trials. We don't have to make them up. And I had a big mortgage fraud case that was going to trial, and I had 16 defendants, and I did not know who I could let out without it hurting me. And I was constantly being told by the mediator and the 16 other defense attorneys that my case wasn't worth anything because my client's mortgage was about $35,000. Um, and so John was like, well, let's run it. So we built out my case and studied it. And I found out what it was worth. I found out who I could let out. Compiled the data, sent it to the mediator, and was like, hey, don't call me until you guys come up with a better reason to tell me you shouldn't be paying me on this case because jurors are going to pay me on this case. And about that same time, John's old boss, John Simon, was dealing with an opioid overdose case. And John said, hey, John, I mean, too many Johns here. Hey, John, let me study that case. And he did. And it caused John Simon to ask for a lot more money than he had originally expected to. And so with both of those successes, John and I were like, well, hey, maybe there's something to this. And it's pretty interesting work. And yeah, that was 2014. And here it is, 2024. We've done over 850 studies now, which is just crazy. Just
Right.
crazy.
You just recently did one for John Simon where you ended up hitting what, like 600 million on a sex abuse case, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Some astronomical number. And then Claggett, you guys did the study with, got 485 million on his recent, a couple years ago in New Mexico. So those are really, obviously, pretty good results for folks there.
For sure.
So tell us about this, the JuryBall though. So, you guys start doing it, but how did you guys really just kind of evolve it and make it so it's accessible to everybody, either through JuryBall with the big data or even the smaller cases with the Fred AI. That's something we want to share with folks.
Yeah. So it took some, it was certainly a process. I think the first year that we were in business, we did about 15 cases. And so since we had so few, it allowed us to come up with, a way that we could build them out consistently and make sure we could see the results and how everything was panning out. And so in 2016, I came up with an idea. It really was out of frustration with mediation, mandatory mediation in federal court. And I felt like every time that you go, mediators don't really have a good sense of what the value of the case is. And often the, defense is different than the plaintiff attorney. And I knew since we had been running cases that this was something that was completely knowable. And that's how I came up with Fred. So Fred's name is based off of my frustration with the federal the federal mediation and feeling like I never could get good results from doing that. Of a more clickified way to build this study that was easy and fast and with less people, so not everything had to be big data, but you could at least get some kind of sense that maybe mediators could run this, the two sides and get some kind of sense of a general value for a case and kind of help the mediation process work much better. But it just took us a while to do small data. It took us a while to build out the platform. But the big data definitely informed that, because as we ran more and more cases, we came up with ways to make sure that we were ensuring that, jurors were paying attention, or that we were asking the same kind of questions longitudinally so we could see if there are patterns or changes as we went across. So that's, for example, that's how we came up with, we had like a 9-month period during COVID where conservative jurors were much better than liberal jurors on medical malpractice cases, because we'd had that swap where conservatives were viewing doctors as keeping them in their houses and forcing them to wear masks, and liberal jurors were seeing them as heroes. And so we had set up enough parameters that we could tell over time, like, oh, there's been a shift in public opinion, and it'll matter for people, picking juries during this time. So we just kind of fell into being super interested. It was really fascinating. Jurors do a really good job. And so, of course, John and I lived together. So we spent a lot of time talking, like, if we ask this question over and over and over in all of these, what will we get out of that? What are we looking for? And then, of course, we have academics who are PhDs who write and teach in this area of law and human behavior. And so they help inform a lot of the ideas that we come up with, like, hey, we're thinking about tracking this. So, like, we tracked people's views during the Trump trial, right? Like, we're just constantly looking for ways to make sure that we're getting a good view of what jurors are thinking and doing. And, when you have a big event like COVID or, like Trump, sometimes those fundamental ideas change for some people. And so we try to keep track of all of that and set up a lot of databases and spreadsheets more than I really want to talk about. But
Okay.
we're constantly trying to get better at it, for sure.
Okay. And speaking of getting better, can you tell us a little insight on how the big data has evolved from 2014 to 2024, and really these studies and the precision of them?
Yeah, we've definitely dialed it in where we're getting better and better at predicting like case expected value. And a lot of that is just because I think we've studied, oh my gosh, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of jurors that we've put through our studies. And so as we've done more and more of them, now, for example, we have voir dire sets, depending where you're from. So we have specific questions that we ask depending on the nature of your case. And we know that they are the ones that can be most predictive. So we have different sets that we ask for med mal cases, as opposed to trucking cases, as opposed to pedestrian cases. And we've only learned that from running so many of them that we see which ones kind of show up as predictive. I don't know. What else did you ask me, Dan? I'm sorry.
Oh, but just how your processes have evolved over these 10 years to really dial it in on the studies for, I guess, precision and more usable data for the lawyers to make decisions about their cases.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten better as we've had more people tell us about their verdicts, because that's really how we dial things in. We take a look at what people are actually getting in front of a real jury, and then a lot of times lawyers have been great on making sure that we know something about the panel, the group that was seated for their trial, so we can look at and see, hey, were we close? How close were we? Did they ask for what we said? And so we keep track of all that. We have a spreadsheet that we go through to make sure, hey, were we wrong on this one? Or were we close? How close? Could we have been closer? Did something change? We also love it when lawyers write us and say, hey, the presentation I gave you was actually not what happened at trial. So that we can also break it down and say, well, what are the differences? What came in that you weren't expecting, or what was out that you weren't expecting? And we run it that way too, just to see if our prediction with the way the trial actually went would be similar to what the lawyer got. So we're constantly refining our processes to make sure that we're as up to date as possible with what jurors are saying in real time.
And I know that you and John and Sean Clegg, collaboratively worked on for a long time, a couple of years, and finally published just recently, and it was launched at TLU Huntington Beach, your JuryBall book. So, what was behind because you guys are doing great, doing your studies. Sean's doing great as a trial lawyer. Yet, as great as you're all doing, you decide, hey, we're going to sit down for 2, 3, 400 hours and write this book and put all this information together. It always amazes me when somebody can take that kind of discipline and focus that hard on the minutia. So, what was the motivation and inspiration behind JuryBall?
Well, it was Sean was early on one of the guys that we worked with a lot and consistently. All the people at his firm, we'd have cases that we studied with him. Um, and so the first time I met him was here in Madrid in April of like 2021, and he came out and he had been talking about the work days, and I knew he and Jordan were doing all these work days, and people were responding really well. So we'd hear from people about the data process. Sean wants me to have data to do the work days, and then we would send people Sean's way and say, hey, you want a little more like a way to think about using the data actually implemented in your case. Sean's got a good system that you can use. So he came out to Madrid to meet with John and I. And while we were sitting there and comparing notes, he was going through how he used data for the Republic case, the trash truck case, and things like that. And we had studied that case multiple times. And so he saw the data evolve. And then we watched as he went through his own analysis with the workday sheets, everything that he fills out to get ready for trial. And we thought, you know what, there's something to this. The data helps inform the workdays help implement the data. So maybe we should be explaining what we're doing and on a broad level, so that people get a sense of how it can work. And so it could be something that's, put more into practice by lawyers, so it gains a little traction so that more people are interested in knowing and learning about it, including mediators, so they can understand more about the process and can use data and everything that they're being exposed to by plaintiff lawyers in a way that helps resolve cases. And I think Sean now uses it he uses the book as the required reading for his law classes. So he's even trying to implement this. So it's just a different way to approach the law now that we can be more informed about what matters to jurors and what doesn't. And so sitting around drinking wine and eating Spanish food, we were like, hey, maybe we should do this. And then 2 years later, we were like, holy shit, have we done this? Because yeah, you're right. It just took a while to get it all onto paper and get everybody's parts and to edit it. And then, yeah.
Funny you should mention the Republic Services case, because I was there for a lot of that trial. And I remember the night before closing arguments, and the defense had offered $15 million to settle the case. And Sean meeting with the mom, and he speaks Spanish, I think, and I don't, but just watching I was kind of outside the office, and I'm like, so what are you doing? He's like, we're doing closing. I'm like, and I remember saying to him, like, that's, they got a verdict of like 37 or 38 million. But I just remember thinking how ballsy that was to turn down 15 million, because I remember he offered to settle the case for 10 million before trial. And I thought, man, that took a lot of guts. And he's like, Dan, it didn't take guts. He's like, this was an informed decision based upon science and the data. So I wasn't just, taking a guess with my client's future. I had data and information I presented to him, and let the client make the decision. I was like, wow, that's whole next level of trying cases, where it's no longer a gut, and it's actually something objective. And just on that same note, several of my friends have hit their first eight-figure verdicts with using your studies. And so how big a factor would you say that, 'cause for me, it's hard to honestly distinguish between the mindset of the lawyer finally having a number that they can rely upon, other than just their feeling or their whim, and because the certainty of it. Because so many people was like, I had this data, and so I could say this $20 million or $50 million with certainty. So how much of a factor do you think that is in these results? The confidence factor?
Oh, I think I think knowledge is always power, right? And so there are lots of these cases where it's interesting when they come in, we talk about them, we're building out the presentations, working with the lawyers. There's so many times that I'm like, I have no idea what this case is worth. Just no idea what this case is worth. And it gets rid of all of that, because I think that is what makes lawyers go into the courtroom a little bit gun shy, right? Because we don't know what cases are worth. And it's one of the reasons why in Mo's case, at Kermani Law, it's one of my favorite cases, is because the judge told him no one's ever gotten more than $12 million in this venue, which is something that lawyers are used to hearing, right? Either from mediators or, I think in Westlaw, you can search, like, how have these cases come out that's like yours? But that's not an indicator of anything of what jurors will do. And so when Mo got $50 million, it's like, what does he say after that? What does the judge say after that? No one's gotten more than $50 million in my courtroom. But it depends on each case, and each case has value for jurors that's different, even if they're of the same kind of case facts, meaning like med mal or, but they're different things that jurors are looking for to, help with in terms of damages. So depending on how many of those you have, you can have one that's really explosive. And then once you have an explosive case, I think for lawyers, the confidence is the worst thing I can do is not ask for what I should ask for. Right? So it really helps on both ends. Yes, I have data, and yes, I need to ask for this number to maximize my wins, because we know that's true too. It's a relationship. You ask for too little, jurors can ding you on your win rate. You ask for too much, they can go after you there too. The right ask is really important. So I think it has helped with confidence, and it's helped people want to maximize everything they can for their client, which is always good. Always good.
Right. And Mo and Mohammed Ahmad and Ray Kermani are good friends of mine, and I worked a lot on that case with them. And so I was so happy, because they had such a difficult judge, and he's still being difficult, but hopefully it's in the appellate process and stuff. But like, that was such a great result. in such an interesting place. And, they really, obviously they had the big data, but they really worked that case up, put everything they had into it. Like just having Dorothy Clay Sims help them with the, defense depositions, hiring, Cliff Atkinson with, for the PowerPoints. They spared no expense. They put everything into it, and they got the result. And then another friend of mine who I went to high school with, Jason Wechter, recently got like a $27 million verdict on a leg amputation case. And, that was his first foray to the eight digits. And so, it makes me so happy when I see my friends have such success.
Oh, that's so
and,
nice, Dan.
beyond where they were, right? Because we all want to get better and get to, that's how we judge our trial lawyers. Is what's the verdict look like?
Yeah.
And so if somebody, but you and John have been, teaching at TLU since its inception, starting with the pandemic, and, you taught at Huntington Beach conference we just did last June, and we're doing it again next June, 4th through 7th at the Passaic, which I'm really fired up about because I love that conference. But in just about 2 weeks, we have TLU Vegas at Caesar's Palace. And there's I know you're teaching extensively there with JuryBall. So kind of walk us through people that are coming to the conference or might be interested in the conference, or if they can't come to the conference, can watch it on TLU On Demand. As far as the big data, because you have 9 hours of teaching. So tell us what people are going to learn.
Awesome. Yeah. So the first 3 hours that John and I are going to be teaching, we're going to be teaching with Sean, and we're going to be going through the JuryBall book. And what we're trying to do is kind of give high level overview of what it, entails, why we came up with it, and why we decided to put pen to paper with it, and explain a lot of the findings that we include there just to make it more accessible to people. So that's what we'll be doing the first 3 hours. The last 6 are going to be a variety of things that John and I are going to cover. So like damages, what goes into damages, what you need to know, and asking for damages, different trends that we've seen in the data. Sometimes there are you really have to thread the needle when you're asking for damages because there's only really one specific request that results in you winning your case. And so that's very important. We're also going to be covering some innovations in law. And from that, we have Fred. So we're going to be going over focus with Fred, which is the smaller data part that allows lawyers to have a lot of autonomy about when they build, how they build, and how often they build a study to run on a smaller case or just to run earlier. John's going to talk a little bit about Ray Ipsa, which is his deposition summary company that we have that summarizes depositions. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, voir dire, because, a lot of our reports, the big data side, give really good indicators about good or bad jurors and how to use that, how to score, because along with the JuryBall book, we have with Sean a JuryBall app that helps do that as well. So we're going to be covering how that works, why it's important, how scoring jurors just, is another data point for lawyers to use as they're going through and questioning a panel. Or if they're sitting there and they're not allowed to ask many questions, how you can take, any research you can do about people online and, scrape through those indicators so that at least you have some kind of information to use when you're going through the process of cutting jurors. So, yeah.
How about using the data for mediation and settlement?
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that in the JuryBall presentation because that's where, you're right. Sean is really good at being able to turn down large sums of money that lots of people would take because he relies on the data to tell him and can explain to his client, hey, this is a good offer. I agree, but we got to look at this in the context of what, I think in Republic, I don't know, what do we have, like 800 or 900 jurors? This is what a lot of people are saying. This is not chance. This is not random. So we might be costing ourselves some money to take this. So yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that, because he did that in the New Mexico case as well. Turn down money, large sums of money, which is really hard to do. Really hard to do.
You just mentioned the JuryBall app. Is that in the marketplace yet, or is that still being
Yeah, it's in the no, it's in the marketplace, and so the way that you can get access is to really contact Sean, John, or him. So depending on where you are with us in the process, then that's something that we can train you up on and help you use. We just built it together. It loads up the questions on the back end that are predicted from the study. So really, I mean, you have to run big data or do the work days with Sean to be able to get anything from it. It's not like an on the fly kind of app. It's more to help inform with the information from the study, the scores of jurors.
And speaking of Vegas, let me just tell people a little bit about, other than the jury ball track, there's going to be 8 lectured tracks, or 9 altogether. So 8 besides that. And, Claggett and Sykes have a track, and they did that in Huntington Beach. It was very well received because they really go through all the processes of how they build their cases. Nick Rowley and Trial by Human have a track, and so Nick's going to be teaching with a bunch of his folks and how they get the results they do. Brian Panish and the PSR folks, they have a track, so they're going to be teaching and sharing how they built that. They build cases over there. Joe Freed and Satch Oliver teaching for 3 days, and then there's trial consultants that I think you're going to be presenting on that track for at least a minute or two, perhaps, or actually because you're also speaking with Jessica Brylow too.
I am,
And
yeah.
so we got these 9 lecture tracks, and then we have a 15 workshop tracks, which are smaller group trainings. Like Sari de Lamotte's teaching a workshop. I'm teaching workshops where my people are on trial skills and cross-examination, voir dire, presentation. Terry Plotkin, another consultant from California, he's teaching on jury selection. So there's all these different workshops. My mentor, Dave Clark, he really taught me about the unconscious mind. Have you ever met him yet, Alicia? Did
I
you meet
have
him at
not.
Huntington Beach?
No.
You should meet him. He's a fascinating human being. He was mentored by Jerry Spence for about 25 years, studied with
Oh,
Jerry,
wow.
really understands, the psychology of the betrayal and the presentation and driving the anger. I mean, the guy's really brilliant. And so I'm really psyched about that. That his depth of involvement here, because he's also teaching a boot camp with me for 4 days, from the 12th to the 15th, prior to the conference for
Oh,
about 10 people. And so those people are going to come to do the boot camp for 4 days and then do the conference for 4 days. So
oh,
they're going to have like
wow.
an 8-day trial experience, like their own, really dialed in program. Besides all the education, it's going to be super fun because the opening party is going to be at Omnia nightclub on the terrace, which overlooks the Strip in Vegas. Is really cool. And then on Thursday night, we're going to have a theme party. It's an 80s party. We have a great band, Mojo Juju, playing that. Friday night, it's a Halloween costume party with live band karaoke that we do every year. And then Saturday night, the closing party is going to be at Dre's Underground. So that's going to be hosted by, Panish. And the opening party is hosted by, your buddy Sean and Nick. So the host of the opening party. Besides that, on the Wednesday, October 16th, I'm sure you'll probably be involved with that. Sean's taken 144 of his closest friends golfing. Nick's
Oh,
taken,
yeah.
Nick's taken about 75 people or so out hiking. And Kurt Zahner's taking folks out to do riding ATVs in the desert. And then if you want to learn stuff that day, Ben Rabinowitz is teaching a 1-day cross-examination of experts masterclass. And Michael Cowan's teaching a 1-day big rig trucking masterclass that day. So we got so much going on at this conference. We got over 1,000 people, well over 1,000 people registered. So probably be like 1,200 people. But so if you like really small, intimate affairs, this would not be the conference for you. But it's going to be really fun. I know. Were you at both 21 and 22?
No,
In
just
Vegas?
John. No, just
John. So this is your first TLU Vegas experience?
Yes, this is my first TLU Vegas. Yeah.
Wow. Because it's,
Yeah.
so many people think like the TLU Vegas is going to be like other conferences they've been to because, everybody's got a mind, like from past experiences in life, right? That's what you think a conference is going to
Yeah.
be. But this conference is going to be very different. Anything but that. The exhibit hall is going to be rocking. We got a gaming lounge in there with 4 ping pong tables, shuffleboard, cornhole, of course, air hockey, Pop-A-Shot. It is really going to be great. We do a full breakfast, full lunch for everybody. So I'm really psyched that you're coming for your first TLU Vegas, and you're going to make so many new friends. That's what's going
Yeah.
to happen at TLU Vegas.
Well, John has always raved about it. He said it's the best conference he's ever been to. He says it's a lot of fun. So I'm excited to come check it out.
Good, because try to teach, it's great when people are learning stuff that's going to change their life. That's why, some people aren't happy about, like Jordan Logan always cries to me, oh, I don't like all these options. I suffer from FOMO. I'm like, is that a better thing to suffer? I go, that's why I record everything so you can check it out later. And he's like, yeah, but I won't have time to do that. I'm like, well, I can't help you. I don't know what you want me to do because, you're not the only person that comes to this event. Okay. I have to think about the other 1,000+ people too. So if you don't like FOMO, you might not want to come to this event either. And like I said, but if you don't make it and you want to learn everything that's going to be taught, it's all going to be recorded and it's all going to be put onto the platform TLU On Demand, which has all the past 3 years of every live conference we've ever done. Every presentation's been recorded. It's up there. All past like 380 webinars are
Good
all
Lord.
on there. And we gather all the pleadings, transcripts, and PowerPoints for these cases. And it's an app for your phone. So you can literally learn any place, anywhere with the greatest body of, I don't know, I think trial knowledge, trial strategy that's ever been put together. I could be biased, but I don't know what would even compare to it, frankly.
No, I don't either.
There isn't one that compares to it because most conferences are just one track. So there's tons and tons and tons to learn because I like to have, people are like, why do you have so many tracks? I'm like, because I'm not sure what everybody needs. And so this way everybody can find their spot, whatever the biggest gap in their knowledge is, they can go sit through that, watch that live. Or if there's, sometimes there's 3 things people want to see and they could just check it out later. So
Yeah, that's great.
that's what's going
Really
on
great.
at the big event, the very big event. So let me ask you though, for the big data or Fred, like what's kind of like, where do you think it's a tipping point between somebody going from one to the other to get a study for their case?
Yeah, so Fred is smaller data. So what we would suggest is either that's before, so even if it's a big case with Fred, if where you are is in the discovery process, and what you want is to make sure that you're answering all jurors' questions, that you are putting the case together in the way that's best for jurors, Fred's very useful for that. Fred's also useful for cases that are smaller value, like $1 million or less, is usually what we say, because he can give you value. He can give you your win rate. It's still knowledge for you if you're going into mediation. You have a range of what you should be settling the case for, and you know how often you're winning. But those kind of cases don't really justify big data typically. So Fred's really useful for those cases. $1 million or less usually are
All
good.
right. And so if somebody wants to do like a big data study, how do they go about, like what kind of information will they need to get together? You know what I mean? Because people think they want to do these and then they call you and like, oh, I need all this stuff. Like, oh, I don't have time for all that stuff. I'm sure that happens occasionally.
Yeah.
But so if somebody wants to do a big data study, what's the process of doing that?
So we typically like you to be getting closer to mediation where the discovery is almost all done. Everything's baked in. You know what the defense is saying, and you have all the evidence you need to prove your case. At that point, basically what we need are mediation statement for jurors for both the plaintiff side and the defense side. And what we mean by that is you need to go ahead and argue for your side, and you need to write a defense that argues for the defense. We just don't need the case law. We need all the reasons you win, the pointing to all the evidence that supports you winning, but we don't need any of the case law. And so typically we like that to be combined about 5,000 words, although it can be longer and often is. But once that presentation's done, all you need to do is send it to John or I or both. And then what we do is pick it up and review it. We're trying to make sure that it makes sense, that jurors aren't going to be confused. We'll ask questions about different pieces of evidence to see if you have it, in case we know from experience, that we'll need to include a video of your plaintiff because the defense calling them a liar. There's just things that we know we need to include to make sure to give you the best read of your case possible. But yeah, that's the part of the process that's hardest, is the mediation statements, is getting those done when you're also doing everything else that lawyers do day to day. But to get started, that's really what we need, because we don't have any presentations from lawyers for this. It's all in the written word with embedded photos, embedded images, embedded video. We take the lawyers out of it. So it's written word stuff for our jurors.
I've always, found this interesting or challenging for your studies because every lawyer is different and has different abilities in the courtroom. And some are very good and some are quite terrible at presentation of the story. So how does this data, because, I think with all the data in the world and the right story, but a lawyer that nobody wants to listen to, because they're so bad at presenting, and they're up there fumbling around. They're so nervous, and they just have no experience. So how does the data factor in with, I guess, a lawyer's abilities, whether they're a great lawyer that's, the Sean Claggett's, the Nick Rowley's, the Brian Panishes, or the person that, has never done a trial yet, or maybe only a couple of trials and very inexperienced. So how does the data,
Yeah, so the data, at least it helps inform because, we can't account for attorney presentation, right? So the data is absent of that. And the reason why on our end it is because I can get Nick Rowley or Sean Claggett to present the case. The problem is I can't perfectly get the defense attorney. So in terms of studying it, now I've created a variable that I can't account for because whoever you send me is not going to be the defense attorney that litigates against that person. So that's why we've taken it, attorneys out of it. Now, Fred will let someone who, if they're afraid of their presentation skills or are worried about them, you can upload an opening, for example, if you presenting your opening into Fred, and you can get real feedback from 50 people about your presentation skills and get a read on whether or not you're actually communicating to jurors in a way that they actually understand you. But our data is more for, hey, look, it's still art of law and science of law. So when you are the Sean Claggetts and you have a really good presentation style and people like engaging and listening with you, once you give him the data, it's a big explosion. But data should help inform lawyers who are trying to be good, and give them a little bit more confidence in what they're saying and who they're talking to, because our reports try to give you enough information that you can say things with most jurors nodding with you, which is a confidence boost. But yeah, obviously you have to maybe go to boot camp and figure that part of it out, because the presentation part we're not, except for Fred, we're really not into doing. So yeah.
well, luckily I am, because I do my, boot camp here about once a month. This is if you can see behind me, this is where we do our training at. And, and people get so much better at presenting, because when people have never had any coaching on presenting, like, they don't know, how do you make appropriate eye contact with 14 people? As far as what should your hands be doing? Being intentional with your facial expressions or your emotional state. Whether we say good morning, to have a slightly worn face instead of also good morning. Because some people are nervous, right? So it's like, good morning. And people are like, wow, it's gonna be a shitty day. You know what I mean? That's what they're reading from a person's face. Or people often speak too rapidly, in the courtroom because they're nervous. And, just so much to be learned on being a better presenter, because people come to conferences and they get all this strategy and information, which is great. It's important. There's so much to know, but you got to be able to do the physical end of this game too. I kind of compare it to being like a professional, an NFL quarterback. Like, you have to know the defenses. You have to know the plays you're running, but you have to do more than know it. You have to go out and take snaps and throw the ball and have people coming at you trying to crash your head in. There's no real substitute for actually being in trial, the stress of it. But the more we can practice under similar type conditions and get confident, like you said, confidence with what we're doing, call it, leads to calmness, the appearance of certainty on what we're doing. So I think, makes a big difference when you really start working on your presentation and studying yourself.
For sure.
But in addition to all this data stuff you do, and being a wife and a mom, you're also trying cases. Is that so? Tell us about what kind of cases you were engaged in, and that part of your practice in your life.
Yeah, so we do excessive force cases in St. Louis, and we keep telling ourselves we're not going to do them anymore, and then inevitably we catch another one. So we have two guys we work with, Javad Kazali and Jim Wersch. So they're on the ground there in St. Louis, and they're good. They're like family for us. And so, like, John was just at the circuit arguing one that we lost on summary judgment in the Eastern District of Missouri. He just argued that on Tuesday. So I had trial set in April, and our judge pushed it. So we're waiting for it to be rescheduled. But yeah, we're still doing that kind of stuff. We have a wrongful death case in Miami too that we're working on with a great lawyer down there. So we're still in the courtroom doing things. I especially really love that. It's a lot of fun, I think. But yeah, we try to keep our litigation skills honed a little bit. Yeah.
The civil rights, though, the excessive force, what is it that
Mhm.
draws you to? I mean, besides the injustice and the power disparity, and I used to be a criminal defense lawyer, so I am very suspect of police in general. I know most of them are good, but it seems like they're good until they're questioned. You know what I mean? Until
Yeah.
scrutiny, and then they get very defensive and whatnot. So, but what is it that draws you to these, excessive force civil rights cases? Because they're like the hardest
Really?
kinds of cases to do. Let's just put it that
Yeah.
way. Like,
No, they're not easy. Um, really, it was Michael Brown. So we had been living in St. Louis, and when Michael Brown happened, we had moved to Denver. And so our Denver friends were like stunned. And the problem is for us is that really for us that Michael Brown seemed normal. And what I mean by that is not that it's a normal behavior, but it didn't strike us as like, well, that would never happen in St. Louis, really. And so from there, Campbell Law filed like 16 class actions from that because basically plenty of plaintiff attorneys all got on a call and said, okay, so who's doing what with all of this? The problem is that a lot of that stuff is just continued. So like we just settled a class action about the Jason Stockley shooting. St. Louis just has a lot of this. And when you have lived in St. Louis and you love St. Louis, it's a city that gets under your skin a little bit. John was just there and he was like, oh my God, this place. And you have wonderful people to work with. You just want to do right by everyone, really. So Michael Brown's really what set us on that path. And now with everything else that's gone on, we've just continued trying to make things better as best we can.
have you guys did any studies on any other, uh, I guess, highly publicized, we'll call them like Ben Crump civil rights cases? Like, obviously, we have the George Floyd but I'm saying, but there's Breonna Taylor. There's so many of these cases out there. So I was wondering if you guys, you know,
Yeah, we've done actually a lot of excessive force cases. Maybe not as big as George Floyd, but ones that have been highly publicized. We actually do a lot of excessive force cases, and they are cases that people should study because especially the juror demographic stuff that comes back is really really robust compared to maybe like a medical malpractice case where you get indicators of good or bad jurors. On the police cases, either wrongful convictions, we've worked on those, um, in the civil and the criminal context where we've helped someone, overturn a conviction, but we've also worked on them after the fact where they're filing the civil claim for being incarcerated without enough evidence. And then just the excessive force, those all have such potent juror characteristics because it's so polarizing once you get the police involved, really. So they're ones people definitely have to study. We study ours often, often.
right? Because, man, those
And
cases you
Fred
could
and
be
stuff like
so
that.
right,
Yeah,
like 100% right, and still get poured out. I mean, it's like you
that's
look
right.
like
That's
people
exactly
just
right.
don't care about the evidence. They just look at the people involved. They're like, I'm not helping that person, or I love the police, and if they made a mistake, hey, they got a tough job. We're just gonna give them a pass. I mean, it is tough. But besides
It
all,
is tough.
in addition to the lawyering, the big data, the family, you also have a nonprofit that you and John started,
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, we have Jedi. Yeah.
Jedi. So tell us about
Yeah.
Jedi and why, and what's the purpose of Jedi? Why Jedi, and why the name too?
Jedi because we are at our house we are Star Wars nerds. So it's the Justice Through Empirical Data Institute. So when John came up with that, he was like, "Oh my God, we could be Jedi. This would be so great." And so we started that really because we've already had success. So John and Valerie Hans and Jessica Salerno and Lee Ross wrote a paper, an academically published peer-reviewed article about voir dire and whether or not rehabbing jurors works. It doesn't. Do questionnaires help? They do. And they studied over 2,000 jurors and wrote this really large article that has now been used by the Arizona Jury Commission to overhaul the jury system, the voir dire system in Arizona. And so we were sitting around talking about this and we're like, dude, this is what we need to do. We have a way to actually start studying things to find out if the way we do them works why are we doing this? And so Jedi was formed so we can fund academic research on different issues for plaintiff lawyers, really. And that way we can have like, hey, do your tort reform caps work? I mean, we could study them and try. Is it a problem for plaintiffs if you can't make a non-specific non-economic damage request like you can't in Pennsylvania and what, 5 other states? I mean, we can put, information and data to some of these things. And that's what we'd like to do because it's really important. There's lots of things that exist in the law, things we don't tell jurors about when they're serving, that we can actually say, hey, does this matter that you're not telling jurors? Or, when you have a judge who keeps out a bunch of evidence because they're not certain jurors can get it. Yeah, but does that matter? Well, we can test it. And so Jedi is based on that premise that we're going to fund academic research on certain topics and publish the results. And then, lawyers can use that. So we've sent that voir dire article out to I don't know how many lawyers and said, hey, look, if they're not going to give you a questionnaire, if they're not going to let you question jurors, then file a motion and use this as support. It's not the way it should work. It doesn't work this way. And so lawyers have been doing that. So what we're hoping is to get enough data into the system that eventually you'll have judges that read it and go, I don't know. Wow. 2,000 jurors said what? Oh, maybe we should start basing some of the rules we have for the process on actual data. And so that is yes, that is what Jedi is for sure.
And in Arizona, they recently changed the voir dire rules, so they got rid of preemptory challenges, and you can use challenges by cause. Is that a result of somewhat of the Jedi studies? And
yeah, that was a result of the voir dire paper. And actually, Jessica Salerno, who's a professor now at Cornell, she went out and talked to the commission. She was one of the authors of the paper, and so when we caught wind that was going to happen, that someone had put the paper in front of them and they were considering it, she went out and basically presented to them the findings that they had in the paper, and so they used that to overhaul the system. So yeah.
just do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing to get rid of the preemptory challenges?
I think the way they did it's an okay way. I mean, I know that what the reaction we got from Arizona attorneys was, oh, it's much better than what we thought it was going to be. But it's based on data, so it can't be all bad. I mean, I think time will tell is really my answer, Dan. I mean, we'll see. But I think it's on the right track for sure. Because there's no rehab either, right? I mean, it's because rehab is a problem and rehab doesn't work. Telling someone, well, I'm the judge, if I tell you to be fair, you'll be fair. I mean, that doesn't work really.
No, or don't think of purple elephants because I tell you not to think about purple
Exactly. It's
elephants.
exactly right. So as long as they keep with that and they keep judges from going, oh no, I'm going to bust this panel, so we're going to keep people, then yeah, I think it can work well. Because keeping the rehab jurors is just not what the Seventh Amendment is. So,
And, I should have asked you about this in the beginning, but you live in Madrid with your family. You've been living there for quite some time. And so what was the decision to live internationally like that and be a remote everything and live in a foreign country? I mean, it sounds amazing. And
yeah,
and
it's a
so
little nuts. No, yeah, it is. It actually comes from going to law school. So St. Louis University has a campus here, and so since we were teaching during the summers, we had the summers off, but we still got a paycheck. So John and I came out here and studied and took law classes and fell in love with Madrid and said, hey, we have to go back someday. And so John had a sabbatical in 2019, and we were like, we want the kids to be bilingual, and I'm not. John has spoken Spanish forever, but the other 3 of us in the house didn't speak Spanish, so it's not really a good situation to be bilingual quickly. So we thought we'd come to Madrid for a year, and then a year turned into 5. And now my kids are little half Madrileños, I think, at this point. But yeah, one's a water polo player and one's a basketball player, and they go to school in English and Spanish and play sports in Spanish, and we live here 10 months of the year now. Yeah.
right. That's awesome. I was just in Spain last summer, and man, what a great country. What a great country. I'm gonna go back next year. We spent the last part of our trip in Marbella on the
And
coast.
Marbella. Oh yeah, that's
I
pretty.
was I was very impressed with Marbella. I was like,
Yeah,
I could spend a couple weeks here, no problem,
yeah.
and be happy and be happy. Well, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk to you about with all the big data and stuff. And so, if people want to get a hold of you or want to get a copy of JuryBall, because people all the time like, how do I get JuryBall book? And I'm like, I think you got to email Sean Claggett or somebody because I'm not sure.
No,
But
they can go
how do
buy
people?
it online on the website. Go to juryball.com. You can buy it on the website and we'll ship it to you. No problem.
What are the chances that JuryBall.com was available when?
We bought it. We bought it. John Campbell bought that website 9 years ago.
Right.
Eight
Like when
years
I
ago.
bought the triallawyeruniversity.com website, it was $9. I was shocked. You know what I
$9.
mean? Because like Trial Lawyers College was having a big lawsuit and everybody's fighting. I'm like, I wonder, I have this big, broad span of ideas because it seemed like Trial Lawyers College was like, this is the way it must be. Everything's psychodrama. There was the Keenan reptile. Everything must be done just like this way. And, every organization was like, you must do it my way. David Ball at the time was like, you must do it exactly and say these exact words or you're committing malpractice. But, what I really learned through doing all these webinars during the pandemic and what really hit me was like, there's so many different ways to do all of this stuff. There's so many different ideas out there that, it's, and they're all working for everybody and making it their own, however they decide to do it. And so that's why, I came up with the idea of Trial Lawyers University, and amazingly, it was available. Thank God.
Oh
That
my God.
was a miracle because when I started case analysis before that, a few months earlier, I had to spend like $2,600 for that domain name. And I was like, what?
Oh my God.
Caseanalysis.com. And then a couple months later, didn't even use it anymore. You see, these domain names, those domain squatters.
Wow. No, that's
Quite
really
the-
luck. That's real
Yeah.
luck. But I think that's
Yeah,
all
I know.
I think that's all JuryBall cost. John,
Right.
we just happened to watch Moneyball and John was like, JuryBall. And so he went on and bought it. Same with Jedi. He went on and bought Jedi. Yeah. I was like, okay,
That's-
dude.
It's fortunate when those things are available. But so JuryBall, they go to juryball.com to get the book. And how about getting a hold of Alicia Campbell and John Campbell to, find out more about Fred or the big data to see which study, if either, is appropriate for them.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to get a hold of us is to email us. So we are Alicia at CampbellLawLLC.com or John at CampbellLawLLC.com. CampbellLawLLC.com. Yeah.
All right. Great. Oh, and I meant to mention, too, if anybody out there is a law student listening to this or knows law students that would like to be plaintiffs lawyers, we are working hard to give 100 scholarships to law students to this TLU. Probably going to come up short, but hopefully get to around 40 or so. So all you got to do is send, if you go to the website, tlulive.com and apply on the site, there's a very good chance it will be approved. Let's put it that way. Very few people get rejected. Usually it's because they're not law students and they're applying for a law student scholarship. I'm like, you're not a law student. They're like, yeah, but I'm really interested in the law. I'm like, that doesn't quite make the very low threshold. Or I'm going to go to law school in 2 years. I'm like, we're not quite there yet, but I know it's ambiguous. You must have a law school, email and be a law student. But and I'm sure we'll be doing the same thing in Huntington Beach for next year too. So, because my goal, because I always think like, had I come to Trial Lawyers University when I was in law school, how different I think my career would be if I had access to these great trial lawyers and this information and these ideas on how to, because law students, they just, it's so sad what they don't teach you in law school. They don't teach you how to be a lawyer. They don't give you they don't teach you how to network so that you can create friendships and relationships with people to do business with. They don't teach you how to actually earn money. Like if you want to be a lawyer, how do you make money being a lawyer? Their whole thing is, get a job at a law firm and be a slave. And a lot of people are into that slavery stuff for being a lawyer, but not anybody wants to be a PI lawyer. They don't quite fit the mold there. And nobody ever thinks about being a PI lawyer in law school because, they don't really have law school interviews and, for PI firms. And so hopefully this will be the beginning of doing something different along those lines. So again, or shoot me an email, dan@triallawyeruniversity.com. And my cell phone's 248-808-3130. So if there's anything I can do for anybody related to this stuff, get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to take care of it for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
It's a great idea.
so
It's a great idea, Dan. You're absolutely
thanks.
right.
I'm looking forward to it. And I've developed, and I'm designing the curriculum for them. So we have all these workshops. So I'm letting them do, so for the lawsuits, they're just going to be in workshops, meeting lawyers, getting on their feet, practicing, not sitting listening to lectures. Because when you're a lawsuit, these lectures are meaningless. They're nonsense, because you have no context for anything. But at least in the workshops, they're up on their feet, practicing cross-examination, practicing an opening statement, practicing being a lawyer, and start to overcome those fears of standing up, of presenting. Because people are like, I get really nervous standing up and presenting in front of people. I don't know if I could be a trial lawyer. I'm like, if that was the threshold, there would be no trial lawyers, because everybody's nervous when they first stand up. Even after, I know Brian Banish, when he gets, when he hasn't been in the courtroom in a year, he's like, I got some ring rust here. I got to get this out of here. Because and it's like, it's human to be afraid. It's human to be, insecure in front of people. That is not the defining factor of whether you can be a trial lawyer. Being willing to do the work and, focus your mind and be committed. Those are things that I think are much more important than, butterflies or insecurities. So just my 2 cents.
No, it's true. That's
All
great.
right, Alicia, we'll see you in Vegas, where we're going to be building some trial lawyers in October 16th through 19th.
Sounds awesome, Dan. Thank you so much, dude.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.